Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tea at the Ritz with Tricia. It's really good to see all of you, and I'm delighted you could join me. So, what kind of weekend have you had? The clocks went forward, so we lost an hour. That's probably quite a good thing under the current circumstances, 1 hour less to have to get through this. And I did a little bit of housework over the weekend, and I read something on Facebook that made me laugh because it's very much how I feel. It said, after years of wanting to thoroughly clean my house but not having the time, I discovered this weekend that that wasn't the reason. Anyway, I also did go to the cinema and watched The Truth with Juliette Binoche and Catherine Deneuve, two fabulous French actresses. And I did enjoy it very much. It's a lovely contemplation of aging and also the relationship between, the difficult relationship between this particular mother and daughter. But it's good. If you like interesting French cinema, worth a visit to Curzon Home Cinema for that. I also spoke with some old friends. I'm sure some of you did that as well. But I have noticed on the Super Troopers page that one or two of you are feeling quite tearful and upset and having some challenging days. So I thought today I would actually do something about that. You know, what to do when you are down, and how to build a bit of resilience into your life, because that is exactly what we're going to need in the coming weeks. Because this isn't going to go away quickly. We're being warned about that. And if we do have to contemplate a number of weeks, we're going to have to find ways to support ourselves and support each other through it. I wanted to do that in relationship to a story which I think is really moving. Some of you might know it. It's something I came across a few months ago, and it's the village of Eyam in Derbyshire. And what happened basically was that the bubonic plague had been rampaging through Europe, and that plague actually killed, over a number of years, it killed half the population of Europe. So it was a terrible disease. And this village in Derbyshire received some cloth, and in the cloth were fleas which were infected with the plague, and people started dying of it. And fortunately, the local vicar recognised what was happening, and he realised that one of the ways to stop it spreading throughout the countryside around, and also potentially into big conurbations like Manchester and Sheffield, was to close the village completely off from the outside world. So he persuaded what was basically 1,000 quite poor miners and some farm workers and so on, that they had to stay within the village, not leave it, and that anybody that was coming towards the village had to be stopped at a boundary and not allowed to enter. And that is exactly what happened. They started to institute a process where they had church services outside rather than in the church. So they practiced an extreme form of self-isolation. And also they put their coins into a hole filled with vinegar. So a bit like us washing our hands. They understood that spreading the disease could happen through the contact with surfaces. And that those coins were left there so that people in the surrounding villages could come and bring the supplies, but not pick the disease up themselves. There's some terrible stories about what happened in this village. 250 of the inhabitants died, and in one tragic case, Elizabeth Hancock who was a farmer's wife, buried her husband and 6 children. How tragic is that? Anyway, they kept all of this isolation going for a year. And at the end of that year, they realised that the plague had run its course within the village, and they were then free to leave and resume their normal lives. And in so doing, not a single other case of plague broke out in any of the surrounding villages, nor did it wreak the havoc in places like Manchester that it was wreaking in London. So the reason for telling you that story is really to say, contrasted with that experience in 1666, look at how fortunate we are today. We have very superior medical knowledge, we have fantastic technology for communication, and we can still get good food and all the things that we need, entertainment and love and communication and contact, and do things like this, how much would those villagers have loved to have had the advantages that we've got? So putting up with this for a few weeks, let's put it into some kind of context. We can get through this. It'll be fine. And resilience is going to be important. So when you're having those down days, how can you build that resilience? Well, I've got some ideas for you. I hope they help. So the first one is to do with see your body as a system that needs to be maintained in peak condition. I feel that very strongly. This is a time to really, really look after yourself. So obviously sleep becomes important. I'm going to do something about sleep in another one of these tea time videos, I think. I've got some thoughts about that. Exercising is really important because you do need to tire your body out as well. You won't sleep very well if you're physically not tired. You might be mentally tired but not physically tired. And finally, food, the quality of the food that you've got. I'm going to reach out to you in the coming days and weeks about food, because I'm a lousy cook and I am getting very fed up with some of the food that I'm preparing, and I could do with some ideas and help, and I know that there's some brilliant cooks out there. I bet there are. My second thought is to do with your thought processes. I think one of the things that we can do in this situation is catastrophizing. We can get very negative spirals. So a negative thought starts and then it starts to spiral down and we start to make it worse and worse and worse. And it's really important to stop that happening. Become aware of your thoughts. We have control over our thoughts. And if you find yourself going into that, and that could happen and this could happen and I don't know how and I don't know what I'll do when or if or whatever, just catch yourself doing that and going, nope, I'm not going to go there. So that's partly to do with mindfulness, of course, and those of you who practice mindfulness will really be familiar with some of the techniques which will help you in that. Another thing that I'm going to talk about one day. The third thing is writing gratitude lists. I think this is a time for really, really thinking about what makes life worth living. In fact, I've got something here which is really interesting. I heard it was from our own correspondence on Saturday, and it was a guy called Justin Rowlett who'd spent 4 months with the Arctic Research Group, Antarctic, sorry. So they go away and they are isolated for 4 months in a very remote, extremely hostile environment, extremely cold place. And people live there and work there. So he went and joined them. And he said that the result on him was that it gave him the time and the freedom to ask questions. And those questions were, what is important to me? What should I be doing with my life? Who do I really miss and why? And who misses me? Now they are big, big questions, but how important is it every now and again to reflect on those? And this is an opportunity to do that, but in a really good way. So you might go back to those questions and answer them because they will give you quite a lot of interesting context, I think, for this period of withdrawal, let's call it that way. My fourth idea for resilience is find a buddy that you can call when you feel down. There's nothing better than having a conversation with some friends who, or a friend who really understands you and can help to support you, a kind, nurturing friend. And I'm sure that you have those in your life, and I certainly do. And finally, remember Eam. Remember them and think to yourself, as I have done several times since I heard that story, thank goodness that I'm not inside that village in 1666 with people dying around me and no idea about whether I will die or not, or whether I will be able to get through it. If you stay safe at home and isolate yourself, you are very, 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 very much less likely to succumb to this horrible virus. And that is important, as you and I well know. I always like to end on a positive, which I'm going to do. The Archers is going to be recorded with those actors in their own homes. How brilliant is that? There was a danger that it was going to come off air. After, 60, 70 years, my grandmother used to listen to the Archers, and I used to listen with her, and I still listen every day without fail. I love it. Those of you who hate the Archers are listening to this and going, oh my goodness me, she's got to be joking. Anyway, made me happy. And finally, I have a very special buddy of my own. She's called Siobhan. Hello, Siobhan, if you're watching. She lives in Dublin, and she's a really, really special person. And she sent me a lovely poem. So I am going to read that to you now, because it's really nice. And it's called Everything is Going to Be Okay. No, it's Everything is Going to Be All Right. It's by Derek Mann. It's quite short. How should I not be glad to contemplate the clouds clearing beyond the dormer window and a high tide reflected on the ceiling? There will be dying, but there is no need to go into that. The poems flow from the hand unbidden, and the hidden source is the watchful heart. The sun rises in spite of everything, and the far cities are beautiful and bright. I live here in a riot of sunlight, watching the day break and the clouds flying. Everything is going to be all right. And it is. Let's get together at the end of this. There's been some talk of that, really going to the Ritz, really having tea together. Maybe we will. I shall certainly try and create that at the end of this period of time. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much for telling me that you enjoy these. That makes a huge difference to me. And I shall very much look forward to seeing you tomorrow, when I might be cutting my hair, because I've got 3 pairs of hairdressing scissors now. Okay, see you then. Bye-bye.